Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. And this is officially the 10-year anniversary of the Personality Hacker Podcast.
Well, we're late by a week.
No. As in, like, we just closed it. Last week was the 10th year. It was the final one. And this now starts, well, I mean, I guess it's kind of one of those things that, you know, you turn a year old after you've lived a year.
Yeah.
So we are now officially into the second decade of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, and we just did our 500th episode not that long ago.
Right.
Where we talked about what it's like to do almost 10 years at the time of that recording and, 500 episodes. Right. But the 10-year mark is actually more significant because you could do 500 episodes in a month. If you did like 3 a day.
That's true.
Well, I don't know what the math would be.
No,
like
I think
multiples a day. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I'm a feeler. I can't do math. But yeah, so you could do, but so it's significant, that workload, but being able to do it over 10 years, man, that's a whole different benchmark as far as I'm concerned.
We are not, however, going to spend the entire podcast congratulating ourselves because I think we did a good job of self-congratulation in the 300 or the 500th podcast.
Yeah.
So we won't go super into it, but I do think that it's significant, right?
Yeah.
And remember, and I said this on the 500th, I promised you 500 episodes or 10 years.
So we're done. This is the last one. I
have delivered on both, sir.
You made it.
That's right. I made it to both.
You're like the only ENTP that's ever made it with anything that long ever.
Yeah.
Like ever. Like I think there's ENFPs like myself that have made it that long, but there's no ENTP on the planet that's made it 10 years, 500 episodes without missing 1 week ever. That's ever existed.
So you've now
guaranteed.
You've now officially said that feelers can't do math and that ENTPs can't do anything for 10 years.
Whoever's listening knows I'm right.
Yeah.
They know it's all true. I'm not saying that anybody doesn't already know.
Oh no, there's some IFJ that's going to come on and talk about how good at math they are.
If you're a new listener, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's all a joke.
It's all a joke. It's all a joke, right?
Yeah.
That includes life, I think, a little bit. So
that's more of a performance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A bit of both, right? Some absurdity and some performance. That said, if you are a video podcast watcher, not just an audio podcast listener, we have a bit of a different setup.
Yeah, we're testing this out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm not as comfortable in the slouchy chair as you are.
You are so uncomfortable.
I like to sit up straight and be present to my life, not slouching and just dialing it in like you ENTPs. Mm-hmm. But look at this, 500 episodes, you start slouching. Look at this.
I said I'd do 10 years or 500 episodes.
10 years, 500 episodes. Look at this stuff.
I have fulfilled my contract. And I basically strong-armed Joel into doing a more lounging like set because I'm like
sit up a little. I just feel like I'm I feel like I'm like I don't know.
Yeah.
I need one of those like pews, those wooden pews from my childhood where you'd sit up in church straight. Like they were just completely straight and you're like very rigid.
Can I get you a bed of nails?
Yes.
Okay. Just to feel nice and comfortable.
That would make it feel better.
So effectively, what I'm trying to say is that now that I've fulfilled my contract, I insisted on a couple changes. And one of those is if I'm going to do a video podcast, I can't make it that starchy. Like we've had a table, we've had what I would call very uncomfortable chairs that required me to sit ramrod straight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm going to keep doing this, man, I'm going to have to be just a little more chill vibe.
Can I sit up at a table and you can lounge? Like, could it be like a David Letterman of the old, or actually the night shows do that now, right? They have like a desk for the host and the person that's there, the celebrity is kind of lounging, they're laying on their back with grapes dangling above their head and a fan and the whole thing.
That's fine. If you want to be the host and I'm the celebrity, that's totally fine too.
I can sit up at a desk and feel, they always put them real close too. That desk, I think the reason they do it is you have to sit so awkwardly close for old school television that was like square. And so they had to jam you into the same shot. And I think the desk is actually a device to get them close so they don't feel so far apart in the shot without having to like literally sit next to each other like airplane seats. But if you look at those shows, you're really close to the host. Like you're really in that shot. Well, maybe not now, but like the olden days used to be like Johnny Carson. They were like right next to him.
Yeah.
Because they had the black and white square television. They had to get them all in there.
Yeah. And so it might look a little weird, awkward, and possibly even scandalous if they were that close. But no. So yeah, we can do that if you want to. I don't know. I just want to not be uncomfortable anymore. I just want to be chill vibe. Chill vibe podcast. It's the Personality Hacker Chill Vibe podcast going forward. So, but the content Clearly we've given ourselves permission to banter a little longer on this one, but the content will still be good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Has the content been good up to now? If you believe the content has been good up to now, I don't think the content's just going to change that much.
Yeah.
It's just going to be chill vibe. I'm just going to be in a more loungy chair.
Well, and you and I have debate about content all the time. Like I'm always thinking somebody's going to be new listening and they're going to not know what a cognitive function is or SE or extroverted sensing. They're like, what are these in-speak terms? We need to always contextualize this for anybody, just in case there's a person that stumbles onto the YouTube channel or finds our podcast. I'm always like trying to make it an access point.
Yes.
And you're always wanting to not have to take time to do that.
Well,
and I don't think you do not care about new people, but I think it's like, it feels almost like it's like forced for you.
I just want to get into whatever's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind doing that a little bit, but yeah, I don't want to explain the car model every episode.
Yeah.
That has been a little bit of a contention. It's like, well, what if they're brand new? I'm like, there's 500 and some odd episodes. They can go back and listen to an earlier one.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that I don't welcome new visitors, new listeners. Welcome if you're brand new. I don't know why this is the first one you listen to, but you're welcome. But yeah, no, I think I need the podcast to be a little less intense. I need it to be more of like going for it. And as we enter the second decade.
Yeah.
If it's going to be sustainable, it's got to be chill. That's basically all I'm saying.
We have to lounge within a month. We're going to be like in our pajamas, like laying on the floor on bean bags.
That's right. We'll be in beanbag chairs,
holding the mic,
getting high.
But it's like, didn't like John Lennon used to like record his albums on his back, like high out of his mind with his mic above him? Somebody
Really?
told me that. I don't know. That's an urban myth.
Yeah.
ChatGPT 4 will tell me the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
If it's right or not.
Go ask an LLM. So all of that said, we're at the 10. I guess we won't be self-congratulatory and as self-indulgent as we were with the 500th, but
Sure.
I guess I am a little bit in a bit of I'm in a little bit of like a pat myself on the head 10 years mood. I have to admit. That said, you mentioned that we've had differences in our druthers about how we talk in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You've wanted to be more accessible. You always say, well, what if my mom started listening and she's brand new and she barely knows what it means to be an INFJ? And I've always come from the position of the podcast is freely given. It's a gift, but I also want to be able to talk about things that are currently interesting to me. And if right now, things that are a little more deeper, maybe a little bit more Jungian, if that's what's interesting to me, I want to have permission to go there.
Sure.
And the reason why I mentioned that is because I think I've been thinking about this, and I think the meeting in the middle is application.
Yeah.
The meeting in the middle is how do you get it so that you're not too much in the weeds of type theory? Because it almost sounds like you want to make it accessible and I want to make it like super deep dive into type theory. And I was thinking about this. I was actually in the shower. I was like my introverted thinking, just like go real super deep on this. And I'm like, what's the center point? What's the center of the Venn diagram where you and I both meet? And the answer is whether or not we're making things very accessible or whether or not we're going a little deeper. Both of us are very invested in the concept of application.
Yeah.
Using type in a practical way in one's life. And so to me, even though I love models and I love talking about more than just Myers-Briggs, right? Enneagram, but then also spiral dynamics we've talked about. We've had lots of series on generational theory. We've had series on, archetype energies. We've had series on, things that are kind of run adjacent to type. But at the end of the day, to me, none of it means anything if you're not finding a way to become, to have it improve your life, to become a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
So I think I want to talk about in this episode, the tendency we have to go a little too, not to go too deep into type, but to go deep into type without applying every step of the way. Doing deep dives, becoming what I would call type theory junkies. And I like the word junkie because it conveys this concept of a bit of addiction. It conveys an idea that it might now loop in on itself and become more harm than good. And I think that might be an interesting little bit of a conversation today, a little bit of a deep dive, even though I'm talking about not diving too deep unless you're applying, but a little bit of a deep dive into this idea of when are we using type inappropriately? When have we gotten to that place when we are junkies and we've lost the meaning? We've kind of lost our path, lost the way, really.
Yeah.
Lost the thread, effectively.
Yeah.
And so I want to throw it over to you. Like, what do you believe is the moment when type starts to become maybe even a liability?
Well, I'll say this, that one of the things we're starting to talk with our students or our potential students, clients, people that want to work with us. I've been using this phrase. Do you want to understand your problems through the lens of personality type? Or do you want to solve your problems through the lens of personality type? Like, which one do you care about? And I find people, they actually, like, after doing this for over a decade, this week, well, the podcast, we've been doing Personality Hacker a lot longer than that. And we've been running, we've run like almost over 600 people through our profiler training program, teaching the skill of personality profiling. Our personality life path mentorship has been doing group coaching with people for the last year and a half. It's becoming our flagship program just to rival profiler training. It's an incredible program addressing the 8 areas of your life represented by the cognitive functions of type. And I even in these programs, even somebody that's been listening to Personality Hacker for 10 years, people come in and I am still baffled. And maybe I find myself here too. I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to point fingers because I need to reflect. Am I doing this as well? But so many people keep sidelining. They get really close to solving a problem with their personality type. Like, they understand something and they're like, oh, if I just do this, but you know what? I need to go learn more. Oh, there's subtypes now. Let me go down to the subtypes before I make that action. Or, oh, wait, I just heard about socionics. Now I'm going to go explore that. Maybe that's the better system. Maybe that's the system that'll help me in my life. This whole Myers-Briggs thing, I just spent 5 years learning. I'll put that on pause. I need to go learn more first. It's like, just get into action. Like, solve a problem is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh, there's 2 models of socionics. I need to learn them both and compare, contrast.
Or Enneagram or, right. Whatever it is. It's just like the expansion. They keep talking about it. And then it's always brought back up to theory, and it's always going meta theory. And that can be great, but man, it's the hard moments when you're in a fight with your partner. Never happened to me, but if you're in a fight with your partner, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm watching as an ENFP with the ENFP. I'm watching my motivation right now. I can see that I'm motivated to win this argument. Mm-hmm. But now I have to do something about that. Mm-hmm. Now, first I can understand it. I call it. Just because I call it in a dynamic with you doesn't mean you're like, oh, great, good. Okay, we'll de-escalate now. Now that we know what's going on, Joel, I call it, we understand it, but now I have to do something about it. I have to apologize. I got to get control of it. I got to do something to solve this problem. I can't just understand it. And I think that's where the magic starts to unlock for me. So when I see people into theory, I think it could be fun to be in theory. I mean, we talk about theoretical stuff all the time. If you sign up for one of our personality life path mentorships or our profiler training or any one of our live programs, you're going to find a bunch of geeks like yourself that want to stay up till 3:00 in the morning and talk about the nuance of a trickster shadow function in the 7th position that shows up and gets in cahoots with the 4th. I mean, you're going to want to talk about all these extra things, right? And go really deep in it. And, when you bring it to other people in your life, does your mom or Uncle Bob care about that? No, they don't. They care about, okay, what does this mean for me? Like, my family doesn't care at all about the theory of personality type. All they care about is how it could help them. And even that, they're not even that interested in, right? They just don't care. So I'm not going to win them over with theory. And that's the other thing. A lot of people are like, if only my family and friends understood and knew what I know in this system, it's just so amazing. I wish everybody could just know this. If we can just get in this every school system, if we could just get this to everybody, and if the whole world could know this, all our problems would be solved. No, they wouldn't, because there's a bunch of people know it now that don't solve their own problems with it. Mm-hmm. They just keep geeking out on it. Yeah. So I sound like I'm angry about it. I'm like, I think this is a time of year right now, time of this recording. I'm doing so much like paperwork stuff because it's like I have to file New Year's stuff and like taxes and all this stuff. So I'm kind of in a grumpy mood all the time. I think just like an edgy, grumpy mood. Like you're in introverted sensing constantly. Oh man, all the time. Yeah. Terribly. And extroverted thinking. Good Lord. And I'm already there all the time. But this time of year, it's like, wow, just like it's hitting like I'm still trying to figure out last year's taxes. And now this year's are due. Like
Yeah.
you gotta, like I just can't keep up with it.
And it's extra because a lot of the introverted sensing institutions themselves are not well run.
Yeah.
And so if you have any confusion, too bad.
Well, in the middle of this, Antonia Dodge wants to make changes. I'm like, dude, I can't change anything. Like I sound like I'm an ISFJ or something. I'm like, don't change. I just spilled tea. Don't change anything on me. I can't handle it. Like I like introverted sensing, memory dominant. I'm just like, please, ISJ. I feel like that sometimes.
I think an ISJ would be more open to making changes than you are right now.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, because I need something to be stable. Everything feels like it's changing right now.
Everything feels like it's changing.
Like we just got to notice that it's going to be harder and harder for us to email people.
Mm-hmm.
We do, broadcast emails to our data, our audience. I'm sure you are on our email list. If you're not, you should be. We send newsletters and give you alerts of when new programs open. And we got alert that Google and Yahoo are tightening this up for spam. They basically are going to force you to be more spammy, quite frankly. They're going to make you have to be more aggressive right out of the gate in emailing people to get them to respond to you to make it look like it's not spam, meaning you have to put more aggression in your emails, which I don't see that solves a problem. It's only going to make you more aggressive as a person that needs to email people. Yeah. I don't know. I got all these problems, Antonia, and I need personality type to help me solve all my problems, not just theorize about them.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah. Way to bring
help
it back.
me. Okay, coach me right now live. Let's do this. Let's get into it right now.
Well, and that's the point is as a person with your type preferences, you can reflect and go, oh, I'm more grumpy than usual. I'm more grumpy because I'm being forced to be in my weaknesses. That is a fantastic piece of information, but it's not the end. What's the application? If you know that you have ENFP preferences, you run a business, you already have to do too much introverted sensing or memory or extroverted thinking effectiveness. Yeah. And now you're in a time period of the year, it's the beginning of the year at the time of this recording, where you have to do even extra and you're like, I'm a little grumpy. Knowing that piece of information is fabulous, but what's the application? What do you do about it? Mm-hmm. And I ask you that honestly.
What's the personality function of uncomfortable lounging? How do you, is that also introverted sensing memory?
These are comfortable chairs.
They're not bad. I just don't, I feel like I feel awkward. I don't know. I haven't gotten used to it yet. I think over time, this must be an introverted sensing problem for me. I'll cross the board at everything I'm mentioning. I just got to get used to it. Mm-hmm. I'm just not used to it yet.
Yeah.
What was your question again? Sorry.
The application.
Yes, the application. So, like, how do I apply what I just said? Like the grumpiness, or how would I look at it in like a real way, not just a theoretical way or a descriptive way?
Right.
Well, I think knowing that I'm grumpy because of that time period. I think so. There is just self-awareness and knowledge. I keep thinking, why am I the one doing all this? Why am I the one doing this in our company? Like, I'm probably not the least equipped, but man, I'm not this is not my specialty. I'm not like good at paperwork or anything. I just find myself here. So I'm doing a lot of self-reflection. Like, is this self-caused? Have I signed up for this unknowingly? Have I brought this upon myself? That's probably what I'm reflecting on the most in a real way, is to say, did I not delegate this? Am I holding on to it too tight? Am I nervous to give it? And quite frankly, I am. Like, I am not, there's great people on our team, but I'm always kind of like, if our LLC doesn't get filed with the state it needs to be filed with, I'm always worried that like the lights are going to shut off and the whole business is going to collapse or something. So I feel like I want to be in charge of that. So I probably am gripping onto those things too tight. And then I think the other thing from a personality standpoint is if I can get more into, what matters when I'm in introverted space as an ENFP. This is particular to my personality type. ENFP preferences, introverted space. I have access to both of my introverted functions. And right now, introverted sensing memory, my 3-year-old in the car model, it's flaring up and I've got a lot of challenge around it. So it reminds me, I think, to know about type, to say, well, there's this part of me that's the translator. It's the part of me that's a co-pilot of my life. It translates between some of the best parts of me and some of the most challenging parts of me. And that's my co-pilot of authenticity or introverted feeling. That helps me navigate my life in the best way. So it reminds me when I'm into the introverted space, oh, wait, when you're introverted, don't be in your introverted sensing or memory. Move up into what resonates with you, what feels right, what's authentic. What do you actually care about? Do you actually care about filing that paperwork? At the end of the day, I actually don't. Except I care about Personality Hacker. I care about talking to you listening right now. I care about doing this podcast with you, Antonia. So as you go down the levels, I care because I care about all those things. And that has to be done to support those things. But in and of itself, I don't give a crap about filing a piece of paper.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's what it does for me, is it gives me places to go. It reminds me where to go and what to lean on with my own inner resources. And I think and I've developed that resource over time, like introverted feeling or authenticity. I have deliberately and particularly put effort to that for the last 10 years, 15 years or whatever. Journaling, writing, thinking, moving. Like I've grown that part of myself in a pretty significant way.
Mm-hmm. And does it ameliorate when you remember to be an introverted feeling or authenticity? And I think I would probably wordsmith what you say is don't be an introverted sensing or memory. It's like, well, you can be in there. And in fact, you need to be.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to be there all the time. I don't want to be stuck there.
Right. You don't want to be gripped by it.
Yeah. If
it's bringing your morale down, like you don't want the uncertainty of that function to overwhelm you. So the application is to find your way back to home turf, to get into introverted feeling or authenticity, to remember why these are priorities because they're important to you and they facilitate all these other things. And then do you find that ameliorates your mood? Does it bring the energy back up?
Sometimes,
like, no,
yeah.
Not during tax season.
Sometimes I think right now we're under a lot of, like, even the best parts of myself are under a lot of pressure because there's a lot of changes in the world in general. I think you listening can feel it. Like at the time of this recording, you can just feel something palpable in the air. It's tough. Like maybe I can call it a dark energy. I don't know. It's just a heavy energy in the world right now. I mean, a lot of stuff's going on. And so I think everybody's going through this. I don't think it's just particular to me, but I think, everything's getting tighter and more constricted. It feels more intense. It feels like the stakes are higher. We're growing at our, personality hacker. We had one of our best growth years ever last year. And, that sounds like, oh, growth, that's like all positive. Growth actually puts more pressure on the systems that are there. Yeah, you do better, like maybe from a business standpoint, but you also have a lot more expenses, a lot more people to have to be accountable, a lot more moving parts. So it's definitely stretching me as a leader, as a business owner, as a content creator, like and I think the thing I'm maybe off tangent. I don't want to complain. Code switching is hard. Like, and so I think one of the things I'm realizing is I don't have a lot of resource. My inner resource is extremely thin. So my ENFP personality is blaringly obvious right now. And I think that's really what we talk about when we talk about personality types is, how do we know what your personality type is? Well, it's your cognitive preferences when you're under-resourced, when you don't have abundance of resource. When I have abundance of resource, sometimes I can look like an ENTJ. I can perform like, an ENTJ for short periods of time, or ENFJ and be very need meeting and all that. When I'm low resource, I do not have a lot of inner resource. I know that I'm going to be blasting ENFP energy all over the place. And that's a really big awareness. And so I think, somebody might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, if you just heard a few episodes ago, we had Avoiding Personality One-Sidedness with Dr. Darwin Nardi. He was on the main stage at our Profiler training event a few weeks ago. And we started off that talk by saying, Jung even thought this, Carl Jung, personality type's a problem. Your personality type is the problem in your life. And it's like, what? I thought it was me. No, it's not your identity. It's how you're cognitively wired. And it's a challenge because you can become one-sided. Mm-hmm. So I could see under enough stress over time in my ENFP preferences, being more ENFP, and someone might look at that and that's noble. You're more yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm more my default settings because I'm under-resourced, but really, I don't know if that's really more myself. Do you experience that too? I feel like I'm being interviewed, by the way. Am I? This is a weird episode.
You usually interview me, so it's I was actually sitting here thinking, the tables have turned. I enjoy it.
So I'm kicking it back to you. What do you think?
I bought lounge chairs, and now it's all about you, Joel.
I'm in the spot. I'm sweating. I'm like Richard Nixon on the stage with JFK in the 1960 debates. Like, oh gosh, beads of sweat. I'm going to lose the debate.
Yeah. Yes. To your question, do I feel that way? I feel like the worst parts of my type come out, obviously, when I'm stressed. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a loop if I'm super stressed. Sometimes I feel like I'm looping between my first and third functions, or my driver and my 10-year-old. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the grip of my inferior or 3-year-old function. But like you mentioned, it's like I can't maintain the parts of myself that I'm trying to integrate well.
Yeah.
And so it's not like those parts come out. It's not like I'm just extroverted intuition and exploration or introverted thinking accuracy when I'm stressed. It's not like I'm that in those places, but they are places of certainty for me. So they are a ballast. And when I'm under resourced, I find myself either being the worst parts of my lesser preferred functions or the more biting parts.
Yeah.
Or the kind of the worst impulses or compulsions of even my stronger functions. So I can get pretty harsh. When I'm under resourced, my introverted thinking will come out in a very harsh way. I'll start saying quote unquote truths that in the moment feel like I've been withholding them. But really what it was is when I was more resourced, I had more diplomacy available to me. I had more of a capacity to be compassionate and kind and meet the other person halfway and understand that they have an experience that, I may not 100% understand, but that doesn't mean it's not real to them. And so I do find myself, less capable of pulling on the parts of my extroverted feeling or harmony that I believe that I have put a lot of effort into maturing. And because that's taken from me, or it feels like it's taken from me, really what it is I just don't have enough chips to cash in to really use that part.
Yeah.
Now I'm introverted thinking accuracy in all the worst ways, which is harsh and critical, not necessarily in a personal way, but critical in a way with that it probably hits the bullseye for the other person.
Yeah.
And then I find, and both you and I do this as two ENPs, we get into a chaos spiral. It's like, what should I be focused on? And if I can pull on my introverted thinking to tell me leverage points, I'm okay. But I get real tactical and I get into a chaos energy of, do I work on this or do I work on this? Do I work on this or do I work on this? And then I just find myself hopping around. And the more, like you mentioned, code switching I have to do, code switching being really different activities that require me to attend to both of them in a very short sequence of time. Like first I have to do homeschool, but then I have to do coaching, but then I have to record a podcast, but then I have to run a program, but then I have to write an email. Like all of the code switching almost becomes like this chaotic swirl in my extroverted intuition. And I definitely find myself in the lesser parts of those functions. And so to go back to the point though of application, I know from my experience of you, had you been in the same situation we're in now 5 or 6 years ago, I think you would be freaking out.
Yeah.
I think all the work you've done in your introverted feeling or authenticity has been such a centering ballast that even when you're in an under-resourced place and you find yourself like kind of doing that ENFP thing where kind of bouncing around and even getting kind of in a loop with your extroverted thinking and doing this thing and then doing this thing and taking on more and overcomplicating stuff, I still feel like you have done enough work in your introverted feeling to have the most amount of centeredness and ballast that I have experienced of you since we met.
Yeah.
And that's the application part. The application part, in my opinion, is to understand your type and do work in the quote unquote off season to strengthen the parts of ourselves that are available to become better, to ensure we're not one-sided, to in the times when we're not required to perform under-resourced, where we push those parts of ourselves to do things that are hard, to do things we don't want to do. To do, and for our, for us as extroverts, it's inner work. For introverts, it would be more outer world work. But whatever it is, whatever's the hard lift, the heavy lift for you, to do that in times based on a knowledge of self and knowing that those are best practices. So when you get to that under-resourced place, it's the response is so much more mitigated, right? It's not this. As much as I know that we can become chaos agents in these moments, we're not the chaos agents we were in our 30s, right?
Yeah.
I think we've gotten a lot more, chill vibe.
Yeah.
Just in general.
There's a student, a client student was in our personality life path mentorship. And again, if you're listening or watching, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's an 8-week program that goes through all the Jungian cognitive functions. And we look at each one as a slice of your life, both the archetypical energy in the world, but also how this energy relates to you and your personality and the people around you. Because you might have people in your life that represent this energy, in their personality, that you don't have it, but now that's in your life. And so we talk about this energy. We start with the sensing processes or functions, and we move up all the way to the intuition. And we go every single week, we unpack this with a group about, right now at the time of this recording, about 20, 25 people inside of one of those programs. Extremely high touch. And we do a live call every week. And then we end it with a 3 to 4 day live event where we help create a systems map of your life and then a step-by-step action plan to get on your passion, purpose, and mission, to get you on your life path. That's why we call it personality life path. It's blowing up. People love it. Like, they're having life-changing experiences and changing a lot about their lives, like partnerships, careers, trajectories, majors in college, like whatever it is. And a lot of people come in there and they do small changes, and they'll make these calibrations or changes, and they get kind of their systems map and they take a couple steps. We have one student and then some, and there's always bypass. Well, what about this? What about my integrate? And like, always attempting to gain more, expand. And students are doing great on the program, but there's this one student who, we were talking about this week. Every time they come on, we're like, hey, okay, so what we're seeing based on in the live coaching environment, here's what we think you should do this week. Cause we pick an exercise every week. And then there's like a list of all the exercises to tune yourself into that energy in your real life. Cause we don't want you just to be left, out trying to figure it all out. We help each person choose an exercise or a couple exercises that week to stretch them to be appropriate for them. Cause like for me, extroverted sensing week, the very first week we start with sensation, that's my, in the functions, in my cognitive functions, it's my 8th function, right? So I'm not going to necessarily be excellent at this. So my exercises for that week, for example, if I was a student, are going to be a little low level. In ESFP, we could throw a lot of stuff at them because that's their dominant driver function. They show up with that to the world. A lot of capacity there. So it's different for everybody each week, depending on what your personality type is. So, but the group is seeing this happen and expand. But this one ENFJ comes on and this person is just, I see it. What should I do? Help me. Should I do this? I'm going to do these things. They go off. They do them during the week. They come back and they're like, hey, that worked. That was amazing. I executed on this. I did this thing. It worked. It solved this challenge. I had that conversation with the person you said I need to have the conversation with. I did that physical thing you asked me to, you suggested I do. That's incredible. I'm gonna start weaving this in my life now. And there's other students like this too, but this person I'm thinking of, just, they are so consistent, like all the 8 weeks they went through. And then they also joined our post program, which is more group coaching after it. Cause we have some follow-up coaching, because we don't want to leave you after 8 weeks in a live event. It's like, oh, you're on your own. Bye. We have continuing coaching to help keep the flywheel going, accountability, and you keep with your same group and stuff. So they were part of this extended experience. And I was just blown away by how much they were that kind of person. I don't want to just understand what I'm dealing with. I don't understand my problem. I want to solve it. And the amount of execution and action and application that they would take, and the results they were getting and still getting being part of these programs. I mean, I think they would, I don't want to out who they are specifically, but I think they would report that my life was changed. Like I'm continually upgrading my life by taking action on the knowledge I have now.
Yeah.
Now that could look like I'm bragging. Like, look, our program is amazing. You should join it. If there's any time to join Personality Life Path Mentorship, you should join it because it's incredible. We're going to probably start offering it more frequently because it's the program I wish I had 20 years ago, or as a teenager or a college student. Like, oh my gosh, being able to see all these aspects of my life. But it's so wonderful to see. And there's other clients like this person too.
Yeah.
We've had many of them.
Yeah.
But it's just so refreshing to see somebody take so much action in their life. This person's just like a super action taker.
Yeah.
And it's really working.
Yeah.
It's like they take how they understand who they are and they're wired and their people in their life and all their personalities, and they just start to make changes, and it gets some results.
Yeah.
No, not always perfect results. Sometimes it's, there's like a difficult conversation. They had some hurt feelings. They had to work through that, but there's results nonetheless.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And so for me, and that they're definitely a standout. I love having those kinds of students and clients in these courses.
Oh yeah.
Because they show that there is a lot of power to the system if you just get into application. And I recently wrote this in an email that went out to everybody who's on
the emails
list.
that I can't get out in a few months, like in a month, that
That's
are
right.
harder to email soon.
Those emails where I talked about how it feels to me like people like type systems, particularly Myers-Briggs and Jungian cognitive functions. it feels like it's a sword in the stone that's like throbbing with energy. And because it's throbbing with energy, and because the person who can pull the sword from the stone gets an extraordinary prize, right? They get rewarded with power. They get rewarded with the power of the sword and the stone.
Can we say pulsing instead of throbbing?
Yes, we can.
I don't know why. It's just like, it made me like chuckle.
Okay. Are we still doing phrasing? Yes. Pulsing with power is fine.
Or radiating with power.
That's not
throbbing. Just sounded very, I don't know.
What do you want, Joel? Tell me the word. So I can continue on with my...
Go to your point.
Okay.
We'll use throbbing. It's fine. A large, big, throbbing sword in the stone. Let's continue.
Joel, I'm in the middle of an analogy here, okay? You're going to have to let me have it. So there is a power that emanates from the sword. And because of that, it gathers attention. It gathers people's... It's almost hypnotizing. And we find ourselves circling it, and we find ourselves fascinated by it. And maybe another person comes along and is equally fascinating. And now you're talking about it. Now there's two of you and you're talking about the sword. And now it's collected all of these people, and they're all standing around it. But nobody ever actually grabs it by the hilt and pulls it out of the stone. Nobody actually grabs it and uses it to its full capacity. Almost like the power the same power represented in it, the same power that attracts, also on some level is kind of scary, because that sword allows you to start carving the life you want. That's what it does. And it feels to me that the type system that has changed my life personally. The reason why I know that it has this level of power represented in it is because it changed my life.
Me too.
Right. It made me, it allowed me to escape situations that were horrifically wrong for me. It allowed me to find myself. It helped guide me into the best version that I could, like, at any given time. Of all the systems and there's systems that I absolutely love and models that I absolutely love, but I keep coming back to this one because it's the one that most consistently diagnoses what's the next lily pad for me. Like, what's the next phase? What's the next thing I'm supposed to be doing to become more whole, to become the most me? And so I understand that it has a ton of power. Now, I might not have understood it had I not been in a terrible situation where I had to have a lifeline. So in some ways, it's not like I'm just super smart and that's how I figured it all out. It's more like I was super desperate, and my desperation made it so this was a lifeline, and it worked. It was a lifeline that worked. And so now I'm an evangelist, right? I'm like, no, actually type is super powerful. The challenge I think that happens is when we become hypnotized by its potential power, but never quite grab it, right? Never quite use it in application, is we can create a bypass of feeling the same temporary hit you would feel if you were making changes in your life by learning more, by learning all of these nuances, by expanding the system, by getting down into the nitty-gritty of all of these different nuances. You get the hit of the power, sort of this temporary hit, without any of the negative consequences of making changes in your life, because there's always bad that comes along with the good. For every change we make in our life that improves it, there's going to be consequences that are painful, right? We have to let something go. We have to have a tough conversation. We have to leave the safety of a career. We have to like start reevaluating our paradigms.
All of it. Uncomfortable chairs.
Yeah. Stop. You're fine.
They're not actually.
Suck it up.
They're not uncomfortable. I was making a joke. So like, it's fiddling.
Suck it up, Joel. I'm in the middle of a thing. So, there's
No, you're absolutely right. There's these things that we must do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract you with the uncomfortable chair comment.
Yeah, it's fine.
I was trying to be more bantering casual, but see, I failed at that too.
Yeah, you're good. Just wait until the TI is done and then go banter. So there's always a cost, and that's why we don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's effort, there's hard things, there's pain. There's the whole concept of the way out is through.
Yeah.
It really means that if you want to stop suffering, you're going to have to eat pain. Right? Like, you're going to have to be okay with the pain right now to get to the other side. And so, so when we become theory junkies, we get a hit. We get a hit of feeling like we just learned something that could change our life if we wanted it to. We get that hit of like, ooh, I just learned something new. That was awesome. Yum, delicious. Without the pain, the discomfort, that application always costs us. And so, so I think the reason why our appetite becomes voracious for type content sometimes is we keep trying to get that hit to be sustainable, but it's not sustainable until we get to application.
Yeah.
Just learning more theory it can become like junk food. It can become to almost like empty calories. It makes us feel full, but we don't feel full for very long because we're not getting the nutrients that our soul is craving. Only application does that. And I think that you can start applying type knowledge at literally every level of theory. You can learn that you're an introvert or an extrovert, and it can change your life.
Yeah.
You can learn that you're an intuitive or a sensor, and it can change your life. Same thing with thinker, feeler, same thing with judge or perceiver. You can, on top of that, learn that you have certain type preferences. Learning that you're an ENTP or an ENFP or whatever that type is, that can change your life if you start applying it, if you start applying your understanding and awareness. When you start getting into functions, just learning that functions are a thing, that there's perceiving and judging functions. Part of our mind learns information, part of our mind makes decisions. Just that can change your life. Just knowing that. You start to get into your cognitive function stack, knowing what your first and second function are. That can change your life. Knowing what all 4 of your preferred functions are changes your life. It can change your life if you start taking it to application.
Yeah.
Learning the 8 function model, it can change your life as long as you're applying it every step of the way. But if you don't apply it, if you didn't apply it when you learned introvert, extrovert, and so on, if you didn't make any application changes, made no changes to your life, your environment, your relationships, to anything based on this information, you just learned more, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change anything, right?
Yeah.
You will not actually be experiencing the power of it. You'll just be sort of hypnotized, transfixed, wandering in a circle around this sword. If you can figure out how to unlock it through application, though, like it can go back to the source code that Carl Jung originally wanted. And this is why he didn't like type. He thought type was going to distract people away from real inner work. And he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
Even though it's a pathway to it, even though it's the on-ramp to some of those most powerful inner work you can do, it can become a massive distraction. And it can feel like you're making progress. It can feel like you're getting nutrients, but it's just really potato chips, honestly, at a certain point. So I think one of the major things I've personally learned, and I'm going to wrap it back into having done this for 10 years.
Yeah.
One of the major things I've learned in the last 10 years is that there's no substitute for application. And I would take a person who has just learned dichotomies or their type, I would take them applying the information and improving their lives over it or with it over somebody who knows every square inch of every type theory that exists any day. And I think that the former is honoring the model. When you're applying it, you're honoring it. When you're not applying it and you're just learning more, you are dishonoring the model, in my opinion.
Do you think you know more about the system and model now than you did 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
I do too.
No question.
And what's interesting, sometimes our students, our clients that come into some of our high level programs, and even just our general live events or something like that, sometimes I can see disappointment in people's eyes when maybe they come up to a microphone at one of our live podcasts and they're asking a question for like some live coaching, or either at one of our personal life path mentorships or even profiler training or advanced program or something. They might ask for advice or coaching, and they're almost sad or disappointed when it's not a complex answer, when it doesn't have like nuance and complexity. Well, that's your analytic, fourth function, all these extra definition. And we're like, look, this is really what it is. And we go back to the thing that they aren't doing, like the action they're not taking. And you can almost see a disappointment and like a crestfallen nature to, I want it to be more complex than this. I don't want it to be just simple, like get into my Copilot and grow that. Like that can't be it.
Right.
And this ENFJ person I'm talking about, that's the kind of person they hear that and they're like, okay. And they just go do it.
Right.
They don't feel the need for it to be overcomplicated to go take action on it. And that's what we found. We've actually gotten more simple in the way we teach this, guide this, coach this, and everything. The longer we do this, actually coaching with this, with real people in their life, the complexity is it kills action. It kills application.
Yep.
It kills the ability to have it change your life. Now, you and I have decided to learn all of that so we can access all of the nuance that we need to when we're in a live coaching environment or dynamic. But usually it's not appropriate to bring much nuance or much depth out in that application format because we're trying to solve something with you want to understand your problem, you want to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to solve it. We strip away all the complexity. There's usually very simple things that we need to do or focus on.
Yeah.
They're not easy.
Right.
But they're usually simple.
Yep.
And I think that's the difference. And I think what we end up doing is we flip it and we say, well, complexity makes the action easier or something. Like a complexity in its definition or understanding makes the action easier. And I don't know why we think that, but it doesn't. It just clearly does not. After years of coaching, group coaching, one-to-one coaching, live event coaching, teaching, training through all of these models, complexity kills personal growth.
Well, there is something to be said that, and I say this a lot. So I do think that a good diagnostic leads to a good prescription.
Sure.
And sometimes you have to understand the complexity of how a system is operating in order to create a good diagnostic.
Yes.
So there is something to be said for understanding complexity. That said, a good diagnostic does not replace a good prescription.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I don't understand. Or at least that's where I sort of, I think that we end up doing ourselves a disservice by believing that the best diagnostic is a replacement for a prescription. And I think part of what ends up happening, I'm glad you mentioned that idea, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I think that I probably communicated more complexity early on when I was learning it myself, right? Like as I was learning complex concepts and sort of going down the rabbit hole of theory, that was also very interesting to me. So I can appreciate why it's interesting because it was interesting to me at one time too.
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't until I understood the magic of and the importance of application, though, of applying literally everything that can be applied. It wasn't until I got to that place where I realized that a lot of the type theory that I thought I knew was not actually accurate, not until I got to application. And so the other thing that application does is it takes us out of the fantasy of type, because type theory is really elegant. That's part of why it's so hypnotizing.
Yeah. It's
a very elegant theory for the most part. And it wasn't until the messiness of life.
The theory didn't work.
Yeah. Or not the way I thought it did.
Exactly.
Right. There's a lot of exceptions to rules. There's a lot of things that I would make dumb comments like an ENTJ would never ... I mean, I made those comments all the time. I see them all the time, right? You can't be an ISFP. An ISFP would never ... I'm like, you mean do human things? Why would an ISFP never do human things, right? If it's a thing that's done, we will do it. Now, we might not do it with the same aplomb that another type would. And it might not be something that we're going to get a lot of attention for.
Or have certainty around.
Exactly. But there's a lot of things that all of us can do that have nothing to do with type. And so the more application I saw, the more I realized that the theory is incomplete without application. And it does get a lot more simple. So there's I would say that probably the number one thing I've learned in 10 years is to not allow type to be a spiritual bypass. And it's very easy for just about anything to be a bypass. And I think it's because authentic personal development is a moving target. You have to do the right thing And you have to do enough of the right thing to get to the other side of whatever challenge you're experiencing. For sometimes that's rest. Sometimes that's hard work. Sometimes that's going easy on yourself. Sometimes it's going harder on yourself. Sometimes it's intellectual. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's kinesthetic. Sometimes it's with people. Sometimes it's alone, right? It's always changing. And so since our like authentic growth and development requires us to have a vigilance around its constantly changing tone, right? Like we have to keep our finger on the pulse of like, I'm not at the same moment in the timeline that I was before. So the thing that worked for me before might not work for me now. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to be ready for that. And I have to be willing to let go of preconceptions all the time. I have to be in constant perpetual beginner's mind about myself in order to do authentic growth, because I'm not the same person I was before, especially if I benefited from the growth I did before. And so the application of type also teaches us how evolving all of it is. And so if we get too attached to the theory of type, if we become too much of a quote unquote junkie around it, and we get our little hits of thinking that we know everything and that we're intellectually superior to other people. And I would say probably the number one symbol of this is when we overfocus on the importance of diagnosing people's types. Right. And that seems to be like, you can tell that that's when people are in a churn.
But that's the application for a lot of people.
That's the application for a lot of people. You're right.
Like, so they're saying, I am applying it, Antonia.
Right.
I'm trying to help type people.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So isn't that what you're talking about? Applying it? That's what I'm doing.
Right. And so I think that's when you start to getting into a hamster wheel of churn. That's like the first phase is, you're not applying it in your life enough when you're obsessed with diagnosing everybody else's type. Now, I say this as a person who's been running the Profire training course for over a decade, right? That's one of our flagship programs, is to teach people, right? How to help people come to their best fit type. Yeah. We do a lot of work though in this area with our students to say, this is not what it's about. That's right.
This is just to get you to the place. Well, it's that moment when somebody looks at you and goes, what do I do with this?
What do I do?
That's the moment that you want. That's where the application can start.
That's right. Yep. And it is a complex thing. It is truly a complex thing to help somebody come to a best fit type, because you have to have mastery over the system and you have to have an understanding of an individual. You have to have enough understanding of the individual to be able to pair them with this complex system. And that means that you have to know them. Like this idea of being able to run around and tell people that they're mistyped and you've never met them, you've never had a conversation with them. The hubris of believing you know somebody's type better than they do when you've never had a conversation with them. You might have like seen one video or like read a handful of, like a half a dozen tweets or something. And you're like, you're not this type. This type would never ... right? So you can tell that when people are obsessed with being the best at that, there's a bit of an application churn happening, right? That is the level of the application.
Yeah.
You start truly applying it in your life. You become a better version of yourself. You find wholeness of self. You improve your relationships. You start reevaluating your thoughts and belief structures. You improve your relationships with people, or complete them, because that's where it has to happen next. You make changes in your career, or you ameliorate your career. All of those things, that's the application. And it's watching yourself be able to handle things. It's maturing, right? That's what personal growth is. It's accelerated maturity. Right? When you watch yourself mature much faster than your contemporaries of your same age, when you watch yourself become, like I mentioned, 5-6 years ago, the same context we find ourselves in right now, we probably would be freaking out about, but we're not freaking out about it, right? Because we've done a ton of work between then and now to make it so that, we're stressed. There's a lot of things going wrong right now. We're not handling it beautifully, right? We're not handling it with elegance, but we're not devolving, right? Which is probably what would have happened half a dozen years ago. So I think it's hard to communicate the importance of application enough. And I actually think that it's and we've been talking about it a lot, I think, in recent podcasts, but it's really, I think it's what separates, it's what separates the actual masters from the enthusiasts. If you can start improving your life with the content, now you have mastery of the original intent of the type system.
Yeah. It is interesting that I mean, I think I came to, my motivations were much more ego driven at the early days of my understanding of personality type. If I'm honest with myself, I truly wanted to know more about people than, I wanted to have the upper hand. I think that's one of my core motivations very early on is I can know more about that person. They know about themselves. That's cool. There was a little bit of motivation there. And then I think the instinct too is to put your mark on it. I noticed like a lot of people when they get into personality type, especially 5, 6, 7 years ago, people were like, oh, I'm going to go create a new assessment, or I'm going to create the new Joel Mark Witt assessment system or whatever, the JMWA, and it's going to be the better typing system. It's like, that was where a lot of the effort was placed rather than, oh, how can I use this in my life? Like, how can I use this to grow or improve my relationship? A lot of people were like, especially in our world, that we're there, and it was kind of like to further some kind of a knowledge base or to define it better or to recontextualize it in a better way. And I still see a lot of energy there. And it's interesting to think that's really, it draws up. I'm wondering if is everything we learn like that? Like if you learn about like how to play Magic the Gathering, do you get like ego driven and you want to create another system to define it? Like it really speaks to just how much power is here by what we do with it around our ego. To me, to say we don't really do that with other things as much. And we do have ego plays with all sorts of stuff, but we really do ego play here. And it's just very fascinating to me. And I think I go back to the question at the very beginning. Do you want to understand your problem or do you want to solve it? Do you want to understand your personality or do you want to use it for something to further your life in some way?
Yeah.
And, we've seen people do both. And I think there's tons of validity to just theorizing or understanding a system. There's nothing wrong with it, I think.
I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong necessarily, but I do think that it creates a cap. And I would continually recommend people dip their toe into a lot of application.
Well, I get peeved because that just distracts people that need help. Like I get a little frustrated because it's like, there's somebody that needs help. They find some YouTube channel of somebody talking about type theory and they get a sense of, oh, this could help me. And they follow this rabbit trail. And it doesn't help them at all. And they get disillusioned. They're like, oh, they told me this. And now it just feels like, it doesn't go anywhere. And then they get turned off to the whole idea of tuning into their personality. And now we've got, instead of somebody that can understand the power of the system, they're kind of against it maybe, or they have disillusionment, or that's a little frustrating. But other than that, I can't really see, I guess theorizing is, that's where people start to kind of understand stuff and go that route. I don't know.
And I think it's valid to mention that you started out it being about like ego over others. I mean, everything's about ego at the end of the day, right?
Because, the upper hand though. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like specifically the power play, right? The upper hand element. The I know something you don't know, which is can be a bit persuasive in any community or a series of communities that organize around systems that have power.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen with spiral dynamics. I've seen it happen in Enneagram. I've seen it happen in like basically every community.
NLP, hypnosis.
Yeah, exactly. And it's understandable to start with the ego play. I think everybody does, right? Because we're just trying to get along, right? That's part of survival. I think the reason why I'm harping on this subject so often is because, well, maybe it's an enlightenment for me. And whenever something is like really clearly obvious, when I gain clarity around something, I end up harping on it for a while. And even though application has always been, in my mind, a path to mastery, or at least not always, excuse me, it became that way at a certain point. It started to become clear. I think at this point, I do feel like we are that we have an ability to set the trajectory of how people in general will be in the relationship with these systems. We're actually, I mean, we're not super early adopters, but when it comes to
Talking about all of us, like person listening to, or just you and me specifically?
Yeah, all of us, right?
Like the three of us right now.
That's right. Everybody who's really into the system has an ability to set a trajectory of how people will be engaging with this in a big way, because we're planting flags right now. And how we've used type has, as a community has changed over the decades. I think at this point, though, we're still in the early days before it really globally explodes. And I never thought, I was like, maybe it'll explode. Who knows? But I'm starting to get this feeling that it's going to be a global phenomena.
Yeah.
More so than it even has been. And so we have an ability to set a tone for how people will be engaging and seeing this content. And if we forget and miss the importance of application, applying it in our lives, helping it become better versions of ourselves, more whole, complete versions of ourselves, the way that Jung originally intended in Psychological Types. If we forget that and stay with the ego play piece, where we're trying to be better than everybody else, or we're trying to be the person in the know, we could leave an energetic signature that rings through generations. At the same time, if we are obsessed with and can't stop talking about how much it can change your life and how application is incredibly important and all the different ways to apply it, that also is an energetic signature that can get baked into the system. So that's probably one of the reasons why right now I'm on about it so much, is because I can kind of feel the rumbling of it turning into something really, truly big. And there's probably a bit of me that's like, and make sure everybody knows it's about application. Make sure everybody knows that you can apply it and become better before it becomes something where it's just a runaway.
Well, if you're right, we need to do a lot of work real quick as people. And here's the thing I see. We don't have time to unpack this on this episode, but here's the deal. If you're right that this becomes a worldwide global phenomenon, that means it's going to go very emotional and it's going to go wordless. And right now the system is extremely verbal and digital. Yeah. It's very heady. It's a very introverted thinking style of we parse it out. We tokenize it. We put it into its component parts and we verbalize it all the time in the English language often. Yeah. It's growing right now in Korea or South Korea like crazy, right? So
yeah, a lot of Asian
countries. I don't speak Korean. Do you? I mean, I don't we don't speak a lot of different languages, but it's such an articulated system. Who knows how it gets translated to other languages? So I'm looking at this going, well, I think this idea of action or application, but I also think of embodiment, of embodying these 8 energies, of these 8 Jungian cognitive functions. We have to find ways to code these experientially, embodiment, emotionally. It can't just be the one channel we've used with language and labels. Yeah. Because that's going to break down real quick, because there's probably more Chinese speakers or Mandarin. What does China speak currently? The major language is it Mandarin?
It's Mandarin.
Cantonese. I don't know which one is there.
I think Mandarin's one first and Cantonese is second.
I bet there's more Mandarins or whatever the preferred language. I probably should have looked it up. I'm bearing my own ignorance here, but one of those, whatever language is the dominant language of China, I'm guessing is going to be spoken more than English after, over time, if it's not already.
And in the world, you mean?
Yeah, in the world globally. And then also we are already, other countries don't speak, France doesn't speak English. So there's all the other languages as well. So it's such an English language based system. Yeah. With the words, judger, perceiver. Yeah. Like, do these translate directly to other cultures? I don't know, but emotion and experience can, because it's human. Language is a construct. It's an abstraction. How do we take the question I have in my head? The abstract question is, how do we, if what you say is true, how do we put these flags in the ground and make sure this expands? How do we make sure it gets put in that way? That's a big question. I would love to explore that, because I think that's really interesting to me. I mean, not just that, any personal growth, any articulated thought or system, if it depends on language, that's going to be very challenging to go large around the world. Well, and then how do you keep the quality assurance of it? Because you start to make things experiential and emotional, they get very personalized. So these are the things I think about all the time.
Well, I think we'll probably have answers soon, since large language models are translating into other languages incredibly quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure AI is going to solve a lot of this.
AI will be solving a lot of the articulation piece, but that doesn't undermine your point that it's also going to have to be experiential.
Yeah, and that's what we're really working on. Yeah, like we keep designing things that are more experience-based than articulated-based. That's what our PLP is, our personality life path mentorship. I mean, I keep talking about it, but we made it experiential on purpose. Right. You learn about the function experientially, archetypically, and how it shows up in your personality. And you go out in the world and you do something as an experience to test that and see the results. You're not talking about it with your friends and family. You're experiencing it, getting the embodied experience. Now, NTs like yourself don't like, you like to talk a lot.
Well,
like, it appeals to people like me, like feelers. We like to go and do, like, we kind of emotional. It's more vibing. It's all those things. So,
well, specifically with experiences, though, I think this is part of how we're trying to integrate our extroverted sensing eighth function is by honoring the importance, like the absolute imperative nature of experience learning.
Yeah.
And it's part articulation, but it's part just doing, right? And feeling how things are different from the doing. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think you and I our eighth function really came online for us the last couple of years, where we're like, oh no, extroverted sensing is super important. We should be doing more of it.
Yeah.
We need to be experiencing. So all of that said, I think that I've evangelized long enough for this. Like, this is the set. This is me sort of planting a flag in the ground for the first podcast of the next decade. For us, of our next decade.
Oh, wow.
Right?
You're right. This is the first one.
That's right. And I just want to thank you very much for, I watched you do a lot of like
fiddling,
shifting in your chair and trying to figure it all out.
I'll get used to it. I don't know how to sit in a chair. I'm an ENFP. It's all new.
This is a brand new chair for me. I don't even know what's going on anymore.
I don't know what's happening. I've never sat in a chair before. It's a new experience.
I appreciate
That's how it feels.
Thank you for letting me have this one, by the way.
Yeah.
Have the new setup, the new decor.
We can join all the lazy slouching podcasts on YouTube.
I love lazy slouching podcasts.
We're part of all of your sloppiness. We're here with you. You won.
You're such a snob.
I'm kidding.
Such a snob, Joel.
I'm not a snob. I just
don't know how to sit on a chair.
Sit up straight. Wear a tie. Tuck your shirt in. Now I sound like an ISTJ from like 1950.
Yeah. Or everybody from 1950.
Well, that's true. It doesn't matter what your personality type is.
My ISTP father was still the same way. He was born in 1940.
Like, my grandfather used to tuck his shirt in, not only just tuck it in, he's straight, and he used to line up where the buttons on his shirt with his zipper fly. Like, they had to be in perfect alignment because he learned that in World War II. So he's like, that's what the military does. And he'd get on I'm sure he would be very disappointed if I had long hair. He didn't know me with long hair, but he would be very, cut your hair, you hippie. That's probably what he would tell me.
He'd be disapproving of your life choices.
My uncle was telling me in like the 60s, old dudes used to get really mad at young men if they had long hair. Like, they'd like punch you. They'd get like frustrated and like come at you, like physically. He's like, if I had your hair when I was a kid, I would have gotten punched. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But now people go to stores in their pajamas. So
yeah, your
long hair is fine.
See, nobody cares. They slouch on podcasts. They go to stores in pajamas, have long hair. No one cares anymore, Antonia. There's no standards.
The world's going in the crapper.
We need a world war to get us some standards. I think it's coming. So.
Oh, bite your tongue. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look back on this. This will not age well.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So all of that said, I think we should wrap it up.
Okay. So what do you think? You've been listening along. Do you want to understand your problem or do you want to solve your problem? That's really, I mean, that sounds so aggressive, but I'm actually asking that. Do you care about solving your problems using the idea and understandings of personality type, understanding how you're wired? Or do you just enjoy understanding more and you have no interest in solving it? I'd like to know. Antonia would like to know. Our community would like to know. Come over, make your voice heard. Maybe you have a different perspective than I even framed it that way. It was very dichotomous the way I framed it, but come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode. Leave a comment, ask a question, and more importantly, share your story of what comes up for you when we ask that question. Do you want to solve it or understand it? Maybe you can have a story about, look, I've understood this in this way and that helped me solve it. Oh, okay, Joel's wrong. Maybe understanding more will help. I don't know. But I think I posit that action is required. So come over, make your voice heard. You've been the third person in this conversation. You haven't had a microphone, but we do want to hear from you. Personalityhacker.com and leave a comment. Yeah, I think any intellectually honest person will understand what you mean by asking that question. Although you did ask it in a dichotomous way. It always makes me think of the, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And everybody that's like, being right makes me happy. I'm like, can you meet me halfway here? Clearly, you understand the point of the question. That said, if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave us a rate and review on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. You might be watching Joel awkwardly shift around in his new lounge chair, loungy-like club chair. It's not that awkward. It's mildly awkward. On YouTube, if you enjoyed all of Joel's shifting around and making it work in behalf of Antonia, you can like, subscribe, and hit the bell. It's because I love you. Lets you know when new podcasts come out. Thank you. I love you too. Join our PLP course, Personality Life Path. It's game changer. It honestly is. It's a bit of an investment, but it will change your life.
So I don't know. Is that worth it? I think it is. So if you are listening at the time of this recording, if our Personality Life Path program is available, I get thee to step in and join it and have an amazing, incredible experience.
Yeah.
Extroverted sensing sensation experience, especially if you're intuitive, but even if you're not, it's like, just come like have a game changer of a time. And if it is not open and available right now, then come join our interest list. And we'll let you know when the next Personality Life Path program opens up. And
Will, INTP Preferences, he was on like a year ago talking about artificial intelligence and large language models. Yep. He has not been part of our Life Path program yet. He's friends of ours and he wants to join it, but he said, I have to join this because the people that have been through it will not stop talking about it to me. They are annoying the crap out of me because I haven't done it yet. I cannot tell you guys. He told us this like this past week. He said, you have no idea how much people are out there that have been through this program talking about it, trying to get more people to join. And I think that's one of the best testaments ever is other student, client students that have been through the program talking about Personality Life Path. I know we're talking about a lot on this episode, but I think I'm excited about it.
Me too.
I think I would love for that to be pretty much the primary thing I do. In my life is to run people through that program, watch them have those experiences. Yeah. I had some personal experiences of that lighting me up in a way. Like I learned stuff from it. It awakens me too. Yeah. Like it changes my life every time we facilitate it. I'm like, I can't do it enough. Like I change every single time watching, like guiding this whole thing. I make changes. I'm like, this is incredible. I can't believe I get to do this in my life. Yeah. I would love to do it more. So
running that program feels like if I'm a widget for the universe, this is the widget I am. I run that program. Like that's it. That's what I do.
It's the most ENTP thing ever. I would say like, if that's my life purpose and mission and like the passion of my essence.
I'm a widget that runs PLP. That's what I do.
It's so not ENFP way to say it. Like,
it is not.
I'm just the widget that does this thing.
Are you saying an ENFP would never say it?
An ENFP Antonia would never theoretically say that ever. All right. We got to wrap this up. Yeah. We got to do stuff.
Let's stop talking.
And we got to do stuff. So anyway, my name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships, but what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality. And then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity. Because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first. Because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.